It was a crisp autumn evening when I moved into my new apartment, a one-bedroom unit on the third floor of an old building in the heart of the city. The allure of its vintage charm and affordable rent made it seem like the perfect place to start anew. The first few nights were uneventful, filled with the usual sounds of urban life filtering through the thin walls. However, on the fourth night, I began to notice an odd sensation, as if someone were watching me. Dismissing it as paranoia, I went about my routine. One evening, while reading in bed, I heard a faint tapping sound coming from the living room. I paused, straining to listen, but the noise ceased. Shrugging it off, I returned to my book, only for the tapping to resume, this time louder and more deliberate. Cautiously, I approached the living room, the tapping growing more insistent with each step. As I entered, the room fell silent. I scanned the area, my eyes landing on the large, antique mirror hanging above the fireplace, a fixture left by the previous tenant. The mirror was ornate, its gilded frame tarnished with age. As I stared at my reflection, a chill ran down my spine. Behind me, in the mirror's depths, stood a shadowy figure, its features obscured, but its presence unmistakable. I spun around, heart pounding, but the room was empty. Breathing heavily, I turned back to the mirror. The figure was gone, leaving only my pale reflection. Convincing myself it was a trick of the light, I decided to cover the mirror with a sheet and went to bed, though sleep eluded me. The following days were plagued with unsettling occurrences. Objects would move from their original places, doors would creak open on their own, and the feeling of being watched intensified. Each night, the tapping returned, always emanating from the covered mirror. Desperate for answers, I contacted the building's landlord, an elderly woman named Mrs. Thompson. When I inquired about the previous tenant, her expression grew somber. Mr. Harris was a recluse, she began. Lived here for decades. He was an antique collector, obsessed with that mirror. After his wife passed, he claimed she communicated with him through it. He became consumed by it, rarely leaving the apartment. One day, he just disappeared. No one ever saw him leave. Her words sent a shiver through me. That night, unable to bear the tension any longer, I decided to remove the mirror. As I lifted it from the wall, a folded piece of yellowed paper fluttered to the floor. Unfolding it, I read a hastily scrawled note. To whoever finds this, beware. The mirror is a gateway. She calls to me, beckoning from the other side. I must join her. Do not look into its depths, for it sees into yours. A sense of dread settled over me. Determined to rid myself of the cursed object, I took the mirror to the basement storage, hoping to distance myself from its eerie influence. That night, for the first time in weeks, the apartment was silent. Relieved, I settled into bed, only to be awakened in the early hours by a familiar tapping sound. My heart raced as I realized it was coming from the bedroom closet. With trembling hands, I opened the closet door. Inside, leaning against the back wall, was the antique mirror, its sheet discarded on the floor. My reflection stared back at me, but as I looked closer, I saw them. The shadowy figures, countless in number, standing just behind me, their eyes hollow and faces twisted in silent screams. Frozen in terror, I watched as one figure stepped forward, its hand reaching out from the mirror's surface, cold fingers brushing against my shoulder. A whisper filled the room, barely audible yet chilling. "Join us." Working as a journalist in San Francisco during the late 1960s, I had become obsessed with the Zodiac Killer. He was the shadow that loomed over the Bay Area, a man who taunted the police and press with his cryptic letters and chilling murders. Like everyone else, I wanted answers. But unlike everyone else, I was determined to find them. It was late on a Monday when it arrived, a plain envelope, yellowed and wrinkled as if it had been carried in a pocket for too long. My name was scrawled on the front, the handwriting jagged and uneven, almost frantic. There was no return address. Curious but wary, I slit the envelope open with my desk knife. Inside was a single piece of paper. The words were written in the same eerie style as the address. I froze as I read the first line. "This is the Zodiac speaking." I looked around the newsroom. The usual hustle had died down. Most of my colleagues had already left for the day. My editor, Dan, was hunched over in his office, typing furiously on his typewriter. I debated whether to show him the letter, but decided to read further first. "I know you've been writing about me." I read every word. "You're smarter than the others, so I'll give you a chance to prove it. Here's a clue to my next move." Beneath the message was a crude drawing, a circle with a cross through it, the infamous Zodiac symbol, and a series of numbers and letters arranged like a cipher. At the bottom of the letter, there was something even more disturbing, a set of coordinates. My pulse quickened as I realized what they might mean. That night, I mapped out the coordinates. They pointed to a secluded spot in Napa County, near the shores of Lake Berryessa. I alerted the police, but curiosity gnawed at me. I needed to know what was there. The next morning, I drove to the location myself, arriving just as officers began searching the area. What they found still haunts me. A shallow grave containing the body of a young woman, her features barely recognizable. The Zodiac victim. I had seen the gruesome aftermath of his work in photos before, but seeing it in person was something else entirely. My stomach churned as I realized the significance of the letter. He wasn't just taunting the police anymore. He was taunting me. The days blurred after that. Another letter arrived less than a week later, containing another cipher, a mocking message, and another set of coordinates. This time it led to a remote clearing in a forest near Santa Rosa. I didn't go to the site myself, but I watched as officers uncovered another victim, a middle-aged man, tied up and shot execution style. The Zodiac's game had escalated, and I was trapped in the middle of it. "You see now, don't you?" The letter read. "I am always one step ahead. If you're smart enough, you'll find the next one before they rot." My hands trembled as I held the letter. Each message felt more personal, more sinister. And with each one, he added more coordinates, leading to another grisly discovery. The police started paying closer attention to me, treating me as if I was some kind of Zodiac intermediary. I began to question why he had chosen me. Was it random? or had I unknowingly crossed his path? One night, I received a letter unlike the others. Instead of taunting me or providing coordinates, this one was brief. Meet me and I'll stop. Refuse and there will be more graves. There were no coordinates this time, just a location, the foot of the Golden Gate Bridge at midnight. Against my better judgment, and despite police warnings, I went. But when I arrived, the place was eerily empty. The fog rolled in thick waves, shrouding the area in silence. On the ground, I found another letter pinned under a rock. It read, "You're predictable. That's why this is so fun." Attached to the letter was a Polaroid photo of a woman I didn't recognize, tied up and gagged, with today's newspaper in the frame. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. She was still alive, at least for now. The police combed the area for hours but found nothing. I was left with the agonizing knowledge that she was out there somewhere, and I had no idea how to help her. The letters kept coming, each one leading to more bodies, more pain, and more questions. It wasn't just the murders. It was the way he toyed with me, the way he seemed to anticipate my every move. I began to feel like a pawn in his game, and no matter what I did, he was always ahead. One day, I decided to leave East San Francisco altogether. I couldn't do it anymore. The stress, the guilt, the constant fear. I was unraveling. I moved across the country, changed my name, and tried to forget. For years, it worked. Or at least, I convinced myself it had. Then, on a quiet afternoon in my new suburban life, another envelope arrived. My heart sank the moment I saw it. Yellowed and wrinkled, my name scrawled on the front in that same jagged handwriting. With trembling hands, I opened it. "You thought you could hide." At the bottom of the letter, there it was. The Zodiac's infamous symbol, the circle with the cross through it. And below the symbol, another set of coordinates. This time, they led to a wooded area just miles from my new home. My blood ran cold. I stared at the letter, the symbol, the coordinates. He had found me, and he wasn't done. The game was far from over. Growing up in a small rural town, my friends and I often sought adventure in the vast woods that bordered our community. Among the many trails and hidden spots, there was one place we were explicitly warned to avoid. The old, overgrown path leading to the abandoned quarry, known locally as the Vanishing Point. Legends spoke of people entering the area, never to return. Dismissing these tales as mere superstition, my friends, Mark, Lisa, and Tom, and I decided to explore the quarry one summer afternoon. The path was barely discernible, choked with weeds and brambles. As we ventured deeper, the canopy thickened, casting eerie shadows that danced with the shifting sunlight. The air grew cooler, and an unsettling silence enveloped us, broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath our feet. After what felt like hours, we arrived at the quarry's edge, a vast, yawning chasm with sheer rock walls descending into darkness. The ground was littered with rusted machinery and remnants of a bygone era. A sense of foreboding hung heavy in the air, As we explored, Lisa found an old weathered journal near the entrance of a dilapidated shack. Flipping through its pages, she read aloud entries detailing the quarry's operation and the mysterious disappearances of several workers. The final entry was particularly chilling. The shadows move on their own. Whispers echo in the night. Something lurks in the depths, waiting. I fear we have awakened an ancient evil. A nervous laugh escaped Tom's lips. Just old ghost stories, he scoffed. Suddenly, a distant cry echoed from the quarry's depths, a haunting, human-like wail that sent shivers down our spines. We exchanged uneasy glances, debating whether to investigate or leave. Curiosity won over caution. We carefully descended a narrow, crumbling path into the quarry. The deeper we went, the darker it became, the walls seeming to close in around us. At the bottom, we found a network of tunnels carved into the rock. The air was damp and cold, carrying a faint metallic scent. As we ventured further, our flashlight beams flickered, casting long, sinister shadows. Mark led the way, his steps confident despite the oppressive darkness. Suddenly, he stopped, his flashlight illuminating a crude symbol etched into the tunnel wall, a circle with an eye at its center. "What do you think it means?" Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath us trembled, and a low, guttural growl resonated through the tunnel. Panic set in, and we turned to flee, only to find the path behind us had changed, the tunnel twisting into an unfamiliar route. Breathing heavily, we pressed on, hoping to find an exit. The growling grew louder, accompanied by the sound of scraping claws. In our frantic escape, Tom tripped and fell, his flashlight skittering across the floor. As I helped him up, a cold, clammy hand grasped my ankle. I looked down to see a pale, emaciated figure emerging from the shadows, its eyes hollow and skin stretched tight over its bones. I kicked frantically, breaking free from its grip, and we sprinted down the tunnel, the creature's guttural growls echoing behind us. Just as our strength waned, we stumbled upon a faint light ahead, a narrow opening leading back to the surface. We scrambled through the gap, emerging into the fading daylight. Gasping for breath, we looked back to see the tunnel entrance collapsing in on itself, sealing whatever horrors lurked within. Shaken and exhausted, we made our way back to town, vowing never to speak of what had transpired. The vanishing point remained a forbidden place, its dark secrets buried beneath the earth. But at night, when the wind howls through the trees, I can still hear the distant growls and whispers, a chilling reminder of the ancient evil that lies in wait, eager for the next curious soul to venture into its domain.